Question number 2. What are the odds of nuclear warfare not happening this century? Could civilization establish itself again centuries from now if this type of destruction happens?
Well, I don't know the odds, but my understanding is nukes aren't anywhere as destructive as typically presented. And sure, they could destroy a city, but at this point, destroying cities might actually contribute to healing our civilization.
That is a canonical example of a Martin answer.
Yes, I was going to say. Classical Martin. My take is we suffer more from the fears of nukes than the actual damages from nukes, which up until this point, among everything is actually surprisingly small in a fraction, right? And Curt, you lived through the 1950s where all these duck and cover drills and so on. And even when I was growing up, nukes was still somewhat of a concern, although less so, because China was somewhat out of the way. We knew that if USSR and the US goes into nuclear war, it's probably going to cause nuclear winter or whatever, but it wasn't as a big concern compared to the literature I've read from the 50s and 60s. But I guess the thing comes down to, if a nuke gets dropped, kind of like 9/11, and the city gets wiped out, the rest of the country will still function. You'd be surprised how resilient the human network and economy is. And that's if we're talking about megaton level nukes. If we're talking about tactical nukes, i.e. those carried in smaller missiles, or I think South Africa even had tactical nukes deployed in, well, no longer deployable because they gave them up. Tactical nukes fired by artillery. I mean, that's just a big bomb used on battlefields.
Okay, I agree entirely. So, it's not like there aren't legions of guys, okay, every major government has what's called a general staff. A general staff is a bunch of people educated in war colleges and usually with field experience, who and strategic experience. They're the people, they're the nerds like Norman Schwarzkopf, right? And what they do is they plan for everything that could possibly happen and stick it in a file somewhere. So if something's going to happen, there's a tension rising. They pull out all the files and spread it around to the people who look about it, and they revisit and update their plans, right? And so it's not like there isn't vast amount of research on this subject, right? In general, I have a basic way I look at it, but the general consensus is that with the increase in the number of players, there's an increase in the chance of small scale usage. With the increase in the rapidity and presence of information. Remember, it's not like even the Cuban Missile Crisis where we had fucking satellites and spy planes and shit. It's certainly not like the Second World War where all we had was radar, right? And we had spies, right? And slow communications and telegraphs and radios. I mean, the same reason I say we are doing better at managing the possibility of recessions and depressions is that the likelihood of what do you call it? Cyclical self-reinforcement. In other words, cycles of continuous reinforcement of what I would say the stress or panic response. It's like the likelihood of that happening is too low because response times are too high. So my feeling is that large scale is extremely unlikely. And only because we all understand that the only reason to do that is to think, only reason to release everything is to believe that you're going to be exterminated. In other words, it's mutually assured destruction. All right. So large scale seems very low probability of that. Okay. So does that mean that you're going to avoid the probability of limited nuclear war? Maybe not. So if I were to say what the current consensus is, it's that the probability of avoiding nuclear war is around 70%. About, all right, and the reason that it's even that high is not that there's constant threat, it's that there's spikes in threat. And my argument is that spikes in threat with low information rate of transmission increases probability, where spikes in threat with high means of transformation or in a information transmission are much lower, because it's much easier to come to understand what's really going on, and therefore not take the riskier proposition out of ignorance and fear and stress. Does that make sense?
I'm not sure exactly I got it. You mean the way I understood that is you mean the 30% probability that we will have some kind of nuclear exchange between nations this century is due to series of misunderstanding in layman's terms.
Correct. And that's usually the case, but it's more easily ameliorated because it's easier to fucking talk to each other.
Well, yeah. We're in the internet age where the president Trump can just tweet something.
Right. I mean, it's just so you're not hearing from three voices of spies and military people around the fucking cabinet. It's like the fucking information system is saturated with opinions and knowledge. So I think that's why I see it as lower at large scale. Now, does that mean we won't have small scale or limited or whatever, right? That's not clear. We certainly still have a few remaining agrarian age empires with authoritarian leaders in place. And so there is still a greater chance that they will do something out of the attempt to continue the preservation of their way. But otherwise, then the argument here in this article is that that there are still power transitions between U.S., China, Pakistan and India, and Russia and NATO. I don't see those escalating. Pakistan knows it would be erased. Russia knows it would be erased. China's the outlier, but because they really want to hold on to power and would be willing to sacrifice large numbers of people to do so.
Mao might be. Mao famous is that China does not fear nuclear war, because even if you wipe out half the Chinese, there'll still be a few 100 million around.
Right.
I'm not sure if she might, because she's like Mao version number 2, right? Mao 2.0. But from all the indication I've seen, the new leaders that are going to replace Xi, even the military general who's basically conducting a coup, they're not insane. Let's put it that way.
Correct.
You don't get to that level of power by being
Pretty
crazy.
well, those senior guys, right? Why do they want to fuck it up? I mean,
Well, we've talked about this before. My understanding is that what is it now, 12 years ago, between Xi and Bo Xilai, the other guy who also could have become the CCP chairman, they went with Xi, which is the lesser of the two evils. Turns out long term that he's also pretty damn crazy.
yeah. I have, I am extremely hopeful. And it's for the, not only globally, not for just for us, but not only globally, but I would like to see, of course, the rest of Chinese people get out of poverty, right? That's part of my wishes. Anyway,
I just want to add one more thing. So, fierce nuclear war or pandemic, whatever, for me, I bucket them into this category of availability cascade, i.e., seems so acute, or like the fear is being bitten by sharks, right? Or bitten by snakes or whatever. It seems so visceral, it incites a level of fear in us that magnifies it past its probability. Yes, these are just like airplane crashes, nuclear war, bitten by sharks, and so on. These are low probability, high impact events.
yes,
But it blinds us to the high probability and also high impact events in the long run. I am far more concerned about the collapsing birth rate than I am about nuclear war.
yes,
Because that's the type of stuff that's happening in the background, just coming to the forefront of what do you call it, popular parlance, and yet it's been happening for decades, and it's not going to reverse anytime soon.
that's correct.